here so I don't fill up the cloud. Just so you all know, you are officially now being recorded. The recording has begun and it should persist until the end of the webinar, just so that you all know you're being recorded there. Welcome everybody to this webinar about, what are we talking about today? Oh yes, online discussions, forums, and writing activities. So they all kind of blend together, the tools and the teaching techniques and the pedagogy behind them. So I'm going to try to talk about them sort of in that way a little bit together. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and I'll walk us basically through a series of slides that I made to sort of scaffold the front part. And then we'll switch over to Moodle, where I'll do some demonstration. Okay, everybody set to go? Thumbs up, that helps me a lot actually. I couldn't teach if people couldn't give me a thumbs up. That's much more difficult. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen now. And so hopefully all of you can see now my slideshow here. Everybody can see that? That's what you're seeing? Super. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share it. Present it, not share it. I get my terms mixed up there. Perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk about, hold on, here we go. We are going to talk about online discussion forums and writing activities. Okay, so here's a small little agenda. We're going to talk about teaching a little and tools a little, and then I'll give you a chance to talk about questions or concerns that you have. So I see a couple of questions here, but it looks like Al's fielding them. So how about this? If you have a question that didn't get fielded, go ahead and raise your hand or just come on in with your mic, and then I can focus on my presentation instead of being distracted, which is hard for you to follow. So the first part we'll talk about is how you can use writing in your classes, first to enrich your learning for your students, but also to build community in an online course, which is really, really important, especially in current times when many of our students had physical community with each other as learners, and now it's going to need to be a virtual community. So writing can be a really powerful way to hit a lot of highlights that you're trying to do. The second half are going to be some tools that can actually simplify submission, discussion, and collaboration for students, and a way to simplify how you might collect that work from students, how you can give them feedback of various kinds, and how you can assess whether or not they actually are making progress on the learning objectives that you're set out to try to accomplish with them, and ways that can hopefully simplify that. Right, because it is of course possible to ask them to email you everything, and then you could email them everything, but there's a simpler way, and I'm going to talk to you about those today. So here are some ways you can use writing to help foster learning online, and I'm actually borrowing a bit of this concept from writing in the disciplines pedagogy. They have an idea of writing to learn, and that's a little bit different from what I'm talking about today, but it also borrows from this concept that writing as a tool with which to learn instead of writing as a final product that your students create. It sort of helps us to think about the learning that can happen through that tool instead of just the final product. And a lot of what I talk about today is going to drive from that place. Some things that writing can accomplish are integration, extension of learning, connection with each other, and you can use writing to reflect, reflect, reflect. I said that 3 times because it's such a powerful way to solidify learning and to extend learning, and it's worth being repeated 3 times, I think. And then, of course, writing can be used to help you assess their learning. But notice that only 1/4 of those things is really assessment of learning. The rest of it is actually writing as a learning tool. Here are some possible writing activities, and I could keep writing. I could have made 6 slides of these probably, but I tried to make them in the most sort of general and common categories. Reading summaries or analyses or commentaries, very often in most of our classes, our students are reading something. And if we want that learning to happen beyond just reading, then often we need students to do something with the content they've just interacted with. And summaries, analyses, and commentaries, all of which use writing as the tool, but are sort of different outputs that would help them to do something with the learning that they did with the reading. Media commentaries are actually something that people don't always think about as a writing activity. But if they watch a video, even if it's your teaching video or a YouTube video that you shared with them, they can make a commentary about that. And that is actually often can engage some of the higher order critical thinking skills in what on the surface seems like a very simple respond to this image kind of prompt. So I wanted to bring that up to the front, especially at a time when we're all of us engaging pretty deeply with different kinds of media right now. You can have them do peer reviews as writing activities, and this doesn't have to be a peer review of a formal academic paper. It could be asking them to review each other's work problem sets or lab reports or lots of things. Any sort of thinking that they have produced in a form that's shareable, you can ask them as partners to review each other's sort of thinking, and it just gets them talking about what they were thinking, and that's really powerful. And they would do that in writing so that you could see it online. You can ask them to do reflections and debriefs of just about any learning activity that they have done. It's powerful for them to translate an experience into words and writing. Really powerful opportunity there. And then, of course, some other things that you might ask them to do online are those more formal academic writing assignments like essays or reports or essay exams. A lot of people right now who would have maybe given a multiple choice exam that they would proctor in class are saying, well, maybe I'm going to give an exam where I let them have open book, but I ask them to write something much more higher order so that I can be sure they're doing some thinking around those concepts and skills. So those are some things, if you hadn't thought about those as possible writing activities, keep those sort of in your mind as we talk about the tools that will help us to be able to do those sorts of things. I'm going to go ahead and pause now, even though we're just getting started. Anybody have any immediate comments or questions before we move on to the next slide? I need to talk slower. Feel free to put that in the text.
So is there a way, if you're doing peer review, that multiple students could give feedback to a single draft?
Absolutely. I use the discussion forum for that. I found it, actually it transformed what was typically like a face-to-face writing, here's your draft, peer review your partner, and often that would fall flat or students would just read to each other for an hour, which, I mean, on some level reading to each other is lovely, but that wasn't the best use of our in-class time. So I transitioned that using discussion forums, even in a fully face-to-face class, and it was tremendous, the difference in performance and just engagement. So I'll talk a little bit about how to use the discussion forum as a peer review tool here in the session.
Thanks.
Thanks for that question. That was good. Any other questions before we go on?
Yes. I have a question about, can this be anonymous? Because some students who are shy, they don't like to express their opinion, especially online when their name pop up. So is there any way that we can make it anonymous for them? Or, and is this can be, I mean, do you suggest group reflection or individual reflection?
Well, I think I suggest both kinds of reflection. And I also think that the question of anonymity, it really comes into play in whether or not there's benefit in students seeing each other's work and then having conversations with each other about their thinking. And I am sensitive to the fact that often I'm a writer by training, and it's sometimes really hard to share your work and you feel really, really vulnerable, which is where this question of community comes in, and using writing in ways that is for no points. It's just about the only goal of that writing experience and activity is to build community, like a forum perhaps where you ask people just to check back in. How are you doing now? Welcome back. Or here's a funny meme, or, you know, what do you guys think of this? stuff that just sort of builds community can help people feel much more confident when they really are sharing their work and everybody can see it. Another way to do that is to put them into smaller groups and say, you know, you're just going to look at each other. These small 3-people group are going to be sort of a team, and they can maybe feel safer there. If you don't want students' work to be seen by anybody except you, then you would use the assignment tool, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Okay, it looks like Ben has a follow-up to Jeffrey's question. A peer review tool that is separate from, yes, it's the workshop tool, as Al just said. I've played around with it a little bit, and as a writing teacher, I felt like it was more clunky than beneficial, but if anybody wants to sort of explore or try it out, I'm happy to brainstorm with someone about ways to maybe leverage that. Cool, great questions. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and click onto the next slide and just talk a little bit about tips for making those online writing activities more successful. Note that I'm sort of really intentionally calling them writing activities and not writing assignments, because I think that that helps us to think more broadly about what we can do with writing, and it helps our students feel more comfortable, like they're using writing to think and communicate, not only to demonstrate work and be graded on their essay. It's especially helpful for students who maybe English isn't their first language, or they just don't feel confident as writers. We still want them thinking using writing, and sort of being more broad about how we talk about writing can really help with some of that. So here are some tips, some of many, right? If you provide the most clear and specific instructions you can provide for both the task that you're asking them to do and also how they are to share and submit that task to you. So write a 150-word summary of the article you read, upload a PDF file of your summary to this assignment tool or to this form. We can sometimes forget in an online environment that we also have to tell them how we'd like them to submit that work to us. And so it's important to remember both of those things. It can also save you a barrage of emails, and none of us need more emails right now, for sure, right? If they know how to submit, they won't have to ask, hopefully. If you have them, models of good performance of the kind of thing you're asking them to do, if you can provide them a model, it's tremendously helpful to them, and also means you're more likely to get work that matches what you're hoping for, and that saves time and energy. So if you have a model or you want to create one, it's really helpful to give them a model. If you have rubrics, or you can otherwise explain the performance expectations as early as possible, that's really helpful. You would want to give them a rubric before you ask them to create the writing activity, not after, because then it's too late for them to try to meet your expectations, if that makes sense. You don't have to have a rubric. You can also just explain those performance expectations really clearly ahead of time. And a model, especially an annotated model, is gold, really. If you can say, here's an example of one, here's why it was good, here's how it could have been better, that's very, very instructive for your students. And then I think I saw some questions coming up here. I think Al's got it. Excellent. The last sort of tip I have is a little more maybe theoretical, but if you could sort of let the purpose of the activity guide your grading and assessing of that activity. If really the point is you just want them to have thought in writing and you want them to think about it for at least 150 words, maybe it doesn't matter so much that you read every one of those. You just check to make sure somebody did the thing, right? If they need to continue to perform and they are going to revise and change this piece of writing, then it's really important that you give them feedback and you give them an opportunity to submit a finished draft that has applied your feedback, you know. So thinking about what is it you're trying to achieve with this piece of writing when you're deciding how you're going to grade it can save you time and energy and can just make things more efficient for you and the students. Okay, cool. We're going to go on to the next slide unless people have burning questions, comments at this point. Yeah, a thumbs up, good. Okay. So we're going to move on to tools. So that was sort of like the little brief pedagogy overview. This is an entire field of study, and I am not the most expert of experts in it, but I tried to give you a little bit of some guidelines to think about. Here's where we're going to talk about the different tools that can help you do these online writing activities. Discussion forums are really sort of magical tool, which are basically very simple to set up, and you get a lot of bang for your buck with those. And students often I have not had a single student not be able to use the forums. So I think they just know really natively how to do that. They're really useful for collaborative, student created work, any kind of peer review activities. Something particularly powerful is to have students find content. Like it might even just be what's a meme or a short video or something that you have found out in the wilds that relates to this topic we're talking about. And if they could all share them in a forum, then they're helping to sort of create content for the course, which is really powerful for motivation. And it also builds community, which is really vital, as we talked about. So discussion forums are great for that. Assignments are really good for work that only you should see, like final drafts of their work, perhaps, and or especially essay exams. If you don't want other people to see the answers, then you would have them give them to you as an assignment, because only the teacher can see that. So discussion forums, here's just a few, operational things about discussion forums. Everybody can see everything that's posted in a discussion forum unless you restrict it to groups and things, which gets a little more complicated. I won't be talking a lot about doing that in this workshop, but we can help you if that's something that you think is really necessary to achieve your learning goals. Except for the ratings, only the teacher and the student can view those parts. So everybody can view everything except for a grade. If you choose to grade a forum, and I'll show you guys how to do that, only the student you're grading will see their grade. And you will see their grade, but nobody else will see their grades there, only what they have posted to the forum. In a discussion forum, every single person in the session can contribute. The announcements tool in our every Moodle course is also a forum, but only you can post and nobody can reply. These other forums are open to anybody in the participants list, can upload, and they can comment, and they can start discussions. So it's very interactive in that way. The main kinds of interaction are sharing, discussion, and commentary. That's mostly what you do in a discussion forum. Here's this question about grading. I'm going to show you how, but let's talk a little bit about how that works. You can set an aggregation method and points in settings. I promise I'll show you that in a minute, but it's good to sort of think about that before you see the tool. So you can decide how you want Moodle to calculate the grades. And you basically would need to rate each post and reply that you want to score. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a little bit. But if you want to give a score to only their initial posts and you don't really care about what replies they made, then you can do that. If you want to score every bit of activity, you can do that too. You can also grade discussion forums by just completion without looking at all the forum posts. That's a setting you would need to set up when you build the forum. Set some activity completion, and then you would need to review a report in a different place in Moodle. I'll show you that too, for how to know who has actually met your conditions. And we'll talk through all of that. The third way to grade discussion forums, and this is the way I use it because it matters to me what their performance is like in that forum, not just that they did it, but they have very specific performance requirements. I actually create a companion assignment that has a rubric attached. And so that's like the most complex way you can grade a forum. And you can also do a forum that isn't graded, but sometimes if it's not attached to a grade, students are maybe not gonna have the same amount of engagement with it. So that's some things about the discussion forum, about grading in the discussion forum. And we're gonna look at all these tools in just a minute. But for assignments, this is how it's different from a discussion forum. Only the teacher or anybody who's a teacher in the course and the student can view those submissions and the grades. So it's basically like handing a paper to you and nobody else will see it. and you're basically giving feedback to that single submission, and nobody else will see that, including the grade. The students will upload, which is very easy for students. That interface is drag and drop, really easy for students. The teachers will view it. Any teacher will view it. You can give feedback and a score. It's one-to-one teacher-student communication. Nobody else is involved in that communication at all. Primarily, students are submitting work and reviewing your score that you give it and the feedback that you give it. That's really what the interaction looks like. Your options for grading with assignments, you can either give them a simple score out of maximum amount of points possible. You get to decide that. Or you can attach a rubric or a grading guide. I will briefly touch on rubric, but we probably won't have time to get into the weeds with rubrics. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know and we can do a one-on-one session, or I can make an instructional video or something like that. But I wanted you to sort of have a little background on these tools before we start to get into the settings, and then it's easy to get distracted with, wait, where am I supposed to click? What did she say? So this is just sort of that overview before we get to the tools. So do you guys have any questions or comments at this point before we actually get into the tools? Any comments you want to say? Okay. I take that means everybody's ready to go on. Oh, here we go. When students need to upload PowerPoints or Google Slides, can that be uploaded to discussion forums? Yes, they can upload any file type to a discussion forum, most file types, certainly all the common ones. They can, if they have it in Google, they can, one of two ways, they can download it as a PowerPoint or a PDF or a Word document, and then attach it to a discussion post, or they can put a link to their Google Doc, just a hyperlink, like they would hyperlink to anything. Sometimes, as anybody who has students using Google Docs knows, there can be problems with permissions. If they don't remember to set the permissions in such a way that you can actually get to it and their peers can get to it, there could be some problems there, which is why I generally recommend, unless they're all working on the same document together, I generally recommend that you encourage them to download it as a Word or PDF document and then attach it. They can do the same with slide files too. They can download those as lots of different file types and attach them to the forum. Does that answer your question, Jennifer? Great. Cool. All right. If I don't see any other questions popping up, I'm going to go ahead and start the demo. If you do have a question or it comes to you, go ahead and drop it into the forum or into the chat, or go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask the question. That'll be fine. So here is my little demo course. I'm just going to show the basic setup for a forum, and then I'll show a little bit about how you can score that. And then I'll show you how to set up an assignment and talk about which settings you can ignore, because that's really useful in Moodle, and which settings you really want to pay attention to, because there are always lots of things you can do in Moodle, but most of the defaults for most things, you can just leave them alone. Okay, so in order to do anything in Moodle, as you probably know, you want to turn editing on first. And so here's the forum I talked about. The announcements forum is also a forum tool. It's just a specialized version of it where only the teacher can post and students can't reply. So let's make one that anybody can interact with. So you'll go to whatever weekly section you like, or however you have your course divided, add an activity or resource, and forum is down about halfway down the list. You're just going to add that. You want to give your forum a name. It can be helpful for students who haven't been operating in an online system if in the very title you include basic information like this is due by this time. That can be helpful, I found. You also would then put the prompt here. any kind of really thought-provoking, critical thinking inducing prompt you can come up with, you would put it here in the description section. You can choose to display the description on the course page. If your prompt is very long, I would say it's probably better for students not to put this on the front page, just because your Moodle page will start to get really, really long and kind of cluttered. But that's totally a choice you can make. You can generally, standard forum by default is fine for what you're going to need. I do like to turn on word count, because often, especially if I don't feel like I have to read and it's not super critical the quality of what they're writing, as long as I get them to sort of dig in a little bit, I can say, make it a 250 word comment. And then I will see right away how long their post has been. I generally, you could ignore all of these things usually, unless you for sure know you want to change things. I think the defaults are fine for most of what we want to do. Under the grading category, this is only if you have categories in the gradebook. If you don't, you can ignore this part. If you do have categories in the gradebook, you might want to put that in there. Discussion forums, maybe. So ratings is where you do the grade. That's tricky. So I'll pause just a second and say that again. In most other things, grade is where you set how many points it's worth, but in the forum, you set that in ratings, which doesn't necessarily make direct logical sense. The default is that you're not doing any kind of grading to the forum, but if you want to, you have this option of lots of different aggregation methods. Basically, what for me has worked the best is average of ratings. That way, if I don't rate every single one, then it's fine. I gave them a 10 on their top level one, and I didn't grade any of the rest, they're going to get a 10. So if you happen to rate 5 of their posts, then it will average out whatever ratings they got. That's probably the simplest one, but you can experiment with some of those other aggregation types and see what you get. I do not recommend making this a very high number, simply because the way you'll rate it, as you'll see in a minute, is with a drop down series of all of those numbers. So if you say 100, you're going to get 100, 0 to 100, that's going to drop down, and you have to pick from that. So I think that 5 or 10 is helpful. Note that if you set it for 5 and you give somebody 4, then you've given them an 80. If you have a 5-point scale, then you have to either give them 100% or 80%. So those are the only 2 top level options you have. So 10 often will give you, you can give them an A, B, C, or D if that works for you. The other thing you might want to set, and I'll go over these setting sections again, is activity completion. This will be helpful if you don't want to look, you don't even have to look at the forum actually to know if they did it or not. People often ask me, can't the forum just automatically put a grade in the grade book? No, sadly. But you can set up conditions so that you can look at a report and know if students have done what you asked them to do, basically. So you do have to change the default settings in activity completion to get that. So what you want to do is say, show the activity is complete when those conditions are met. So the default is that they have to view it and they have to post or reply. It doesn't matter, one. That almost never works for anybody. So usually the standard forum is make a post, so basically start a discussion, and then reply to 2 peers. Let's just say that's what you want your students to do. So then you would check off, they have to create discussions, one of those. They have to reply to 2 people. Now, each student will not get a completion check until they have done both of these things, and Moodle can see that they have. Now, Moodle can't tell you whether or not they said useful and, critical thinking things in those posts, but it will tell you if they have created a discussion or posted replies. And if that's all that matters to you, then this can totally be work for you. So you would go ahead and say, if you say save and display, then you can see what students would see, the name of the forum, the prompt, and then they have the option to go ahead and start a new discussion topic. So Joanne, can you set a certain number of points? Sadly, no. You can tell them that they will get a certain number of points if they complete it, but you will still have to go into the grade book as a separate step. And in in a file, in a grading category, or if you wanted to override this forum as an item in the gradebook and enter by looking at two screens, looking at the report and then assigning points. It's sort of manual there. There's no automatic way to do that, sadly. But this is how it looks to the student. They would, or you, adding a new discussion topic, then the student would make their post. Also, students can attach files. I think there was an earlier question about files. You can just drag and drop any file onto there. Most of them. I don't think that Moodle doesn't seem to like pages, but you can do image files or PowerPoint files, PDFs. Let's see. Drop in a PDF. And this is only you have this option as teachers. Send the notification with no time delay. Otherwise, Moodle has a built-in what I call the window of regret. So you have 30 minutes during which time you can change your mind about what you put in the forum before it gets posted publicly. As a teacher, you can say, no, I'm sure, send it now. If you also wanted to, maybe you started the post and you attached a file, or you had partners assigned. If you wanted your post to be at the top, you could pin it and it would always be at the top of that forum post. So I'm going to go ahead and say send it with no delay and post it to the forum. Right away, you can see that there's a new discussion, and this is the title of the discussion, that subject line basically, and who posted it, and no one has replied. So if you want to actually see the content of that post, you can click on the title of it, and then you see the post and the attached file, which you can click and download. Cool. Okay, so that's the basic operation, and you can see how another student could then reply to Robbie's reflection and say, you're right, that was very insightful. We should be friends. You could just keep that thing going and going if you want to. And if you're trying to grade it, you could read them all, which is sometimes really useful. But if you, just like I really can't read all of these, I just need to know if they did it. So in order to see that, you have to do, check out a report. Before I go that though, I want to ask if there are questions. I see all kinds of questions popping up. Subscription methods. Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer Christian's question about subscription methods first before I show you how to look at reports. If you just want to know, did they do it? Okay, they did it, great. I don't care, I don't know what they said, but they did it, so they're going to get a grade. Limit the number of replies. That's a good question. Let's look at that. I have never tried to do that. I'm usually not trying to limit their activity. It's like trying to get them to participate, but I can see how you might want to do that. So let's look. Subscription and tracking is the place, Christian, where you would look. Optional subscription, let me just show you what all of them are. Optional is the default here. Forced, and that means that when they first make a post, they're going to start getting, subscription means you get an email when anybody posts in the forum, which you can imagine will get pretty annoying pretty quickly, especially if you have like 50 students or something. It'll be annoying for them. So optional subscription means they're going to get those emails until they opt out, but they can opt out. Forced subscription means that they can't opt out. So this is what's set on your announcements forum. It's forced subscription. I also sometimes will make a Q&A forum, basically a question forum where they can go to for help. And I always set that one to forced, because if somebody has a question about an assignment, I want everybody to see that question and everybody to see my response to it. Auto subscription, I am going to say, I don't know what this is. I'm going to look. Auto subscription, do you see I click this little question mark? Yes, we can always look at that if we don't know. Everyone is subscribed, but can choose to subscribe. Oh, I guess in optional, you have to decide if you want to subscribe. So I described that incorrectly in the beginning. Auto subscription, you're in and you have to opt out. Optional subscription, you have to opt in. You'll have a checkbox, and nobody can subscribe if you disable it. Okay, did that answer your question, Christian? Point threshold for blocking. Post threshold for blocking. Okay. Time period post threshold. Oh, how many? You have to be able to block it. So note Al, when I click on these, nothing happens. You probably have to say block it after 4 days or something.
Hi, Robbie. Yeah, so you have to set the time limit for how often you can post during that time period. So once you set one of those days,
Oh, I see.
then you're allowed to say like, okay, this is the number of posts you're allowed to do in that time period.
I see. Okay, and so when that time period expires, they can post all they want, or they can't post at all.
Oh, good. Well, it'll just redo itself, right? So if it's one day.
Oh, you can post 6 times in one day, and then tomorrow you have 6 more posts you can make.
Right, exactly.
Wow, okay. I can see why I've never needed to use this, because I don't ever have the problem of my students posting too much. But you may have a student that's really going to town, and or if you think that you might have that problem. Okay, so did that help you, Laura, answer your question? I'm gonna take that as a yes. Okay, if not, flail your arms or do the equivalent of that in the chat.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. What I want to do is make sure that the students comment on everybody's posting. So if somebody starts commenting on one, I'm going to make them comment twice, but I don't want it to be just one posting. I want to make sure that every posting gets a comment. So if I limit it to 2 per thing, then they're going to be forced to respond to somebody else's. And that's kind of why I wanted to limit it.
I see. Well, I think you could get to that if you say you can only post once a day and you're required to post 3 times. They have to keep checking every day, you know, and to come back. But I think another way to get at that might be that you put them in discussion partners or discussion groups. So you're required to reply to these 3 people, or to all the people in your study group or your discussion group. And also another way to do that is to have the due date for the initial discussion. You have to start a discussion by midnight Wednesday, and then you have to reply by Saturday. Because what can happen is if they're just trying to get their work done in the front end, the first 2 or 3 people to make discussion posts will get all the activity. And the people who wait until the end to post won't have any activity. Does that make sense? So there's a couple of ways you can kind of get at that without using the tools in Moodle. But I mean, you could experiment with that blocking of posts. But I think you might get some revolt from students if you keep telling them they have to check in every single day to make a new post. But you could try and let us know how that goes.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so did that answer both of the questions we wanted to look at here? Anything else about basic function of the forum before we look at how to look at the grades and to report it? Good. Okay, we'll move on. So if you want to get a look, basically, I'm going to go ahead and leave, at who has posted what, you can look. I have this little forum here and people have posted. You can go to the big blue gear, more, reports. I know it's not easy to remember this thing. And then activity completion. So it's not super logical, but that's where it is. And the beauty of it is everything that's ever been created, once the student meets your expectations, they'll get a little blue check mark here. So these 2 students have met my expectations for the conditions, and these 2 have not. So you can also download this as an Excel, which is actually much easier to manipulate and to see what you're looking at. So I encourage you to sort of play with this if that's something that's going to help you. Then you would still have to say, okay, all of these students did it, and in a separate step, give them points in the grade book, because it can't automatically push to the grade book with this tool. You can push to the grade book. I'm going to go ahead and I did not, when I set up this forum, set it for ratings, but I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to set it for 10. Save and display. And now when I click on student 2, the post that student 2 made, notice that I have this box where I can rate this post. So it's everything in this box is getting a grade. So, and you can see that you have to scroll down, which is why you don't want to go to 100, right? So student 2 gets a 9 there. Oh, and this is student 3, and they made a reply. That's a pretty good reply. We'll give this person a 9 too. And only student
Bobby,
3,
not
yes.
to interrupt you, but Sue's asking if you could move your screen over just a little bit to the left. She said she's having a little bit of trouble seeing your your screen on, or your window on the iPad.
How about that? Does that help, Sue? I can also make it a smaller window.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Thanks for letting me know. So only student 3, this is the student who made the post. Only student 3 will see this grade. Same with student 2. And if I were to just go through the whole forum, I could grade everybody if I wanted. Or if I only grade this one, then student 1 is going to have a 7 until I grade something else, if that makes sense. So it's averaging out the grades. So if you wanted to just grade the top level posts and you don't grade their responses, that's okay. You really can have a little bit of freedom with that if you use the average of ratings. So that's the way you can get a grade in the forum. I'm going to go ahead and switch to assignment now so that we don't run out of time to see both tools, and then we can open that up to some more questions. So here I'm going to go back to my main course, and you use the same tool, add an activity or resource, to get an assignment in. Assignments have just as many or more options as a forum, but some of them are the same. Assignment 1. I see your question, Erica. I'm going to pop into that right after I demonstrate this. I see you. I see your question. I'll come back to it, I promise. So you wanted instructions here. You can, if you have an instruction file for your essay or whatever already in a Word or a PDF, you can drag and drop it here and it'll be attached to this assignment, which is really handy because students will have everything they need. If they have a template, everything they need will be right here for them when they start to do the assignment. You want to make sure that the assignment is open for submission early enough that students can actually get to it. And if you set the due date, which we recommend, notice this is a 24-hour clock. Also, it doesn't mean that it's going to stop students from submitting after this date. It just means that a late stamp will happen on their submission. The cutoff will actually not let people submit. I discourage you from using this because it's going to generate a lot of emails of students asking you if they could please maybe still submit the assignment because this reason. It's just as easy to let them turn it in and then it'll have a late mark. Also, some recommendations coming out of this current crisis time is to try to be a little bit relaxed or a little bit more lenient about your due dates if you can. I encourage you to turn off the automatic remind me to grade by unless you want Moodle to send you an email reminding you to grade this assignment. If you do, then you go ahead and say yes and tell it when to send you an email reminder. Usually, most of the time, you want students to upload a file to you, a Word document, a PowerPoint, an Excel file, maybe a PDF. If you want them to be able to type straight in, you'll click online text, and then they'll have a text editor that looks just like this one for typing in their response to you. We can't override the submission size, so you want to think about how big of a file they're going to upload. This is where you can do file types, and you can choose a lot or leave it to the default. If they're doing something that's not going to be a standard one, you may want to pick all file types or restrict the file types. If you have written feedback in a Word doc or something else, you can open feedback types and say, let me attach a file of feedback. Usually what's quickest is to just use the feedback box that comes with the assignment. You can ignore most of these things, go straight to the grade. How many points is this assignment worth? I'm going to leave it 100 because that's easy math. If you have categories in your grade book already, you can set this, but we're going to pretend like you don't. Oh, that's here. I'm sorry. I told you the wrong thing. The grading method is, do you just want to be able to enter a numeral? They got an 87. Or do you want to use a rubric? If you clicked rubric, this will take you into a place where you can build a rubric. Looking at the time, I don't think we'll have time to talk about rubrics, but if you're excited about that, shoot me an email and we can set up a time. Simple and direct grading is what you should probably leave it at for now if you don't know for sure that you want a rubric. If you have a gradebook set up, you would pick the category, but I do not, so I won't. The last thing to look at, again, is activity completion. If you want to be able to track who has done it and who hasn't done it based on your the reports feature we just looked at. I like to sometimes tell my students they need to receive a grade before they get a check mark, because if I didn't give you a grade, you should follow up with me. And also, the learning loop isn't closed until you get my feedback. So those are some options there. Save and display, and this is what it looks like. So for the student, this is your view here. If you click on view all submissions, if there were files, you could choose to view the gradebook, or if there were files, you could say download my files. There are no files here because nobody has submitted anything to it. You could also very simply just click grade, and it opens up this really cool grading interface. So what Moodle will do is convert whatever assignment, whatever file your students upload into a PDF and basically hold it in this side window. And you can do comments on it. You can freeform write on it. It's supposed to be a heart that looks more like an avocado seed, but that's okay. You can make other kind of marks. You can change this to be a smiley face or a sad face. Oh, isn't that sad? Or most likely what you'll want to do is give them 100% or 98%. Student 1 did a great job. If you have other kind of template kind of things you could copy paste in, the format might get a little funny. When you're done, you just save and show the next, and it loads up the next student's work for you. Don't want to do that. A good thing to note is that if it's a multiple page submission, you can't just scroll down to see the other pages. You have to arrow over if it's a 2 or 3 page thing. That's what you can do. You can also, you will be able to download all the files if you needed to, if you wanted to look at them and work with them, not in this format, but in just as Word files or discrete files on your computer. All of these grades will go straight into the grade book without you having to do anything else. So I think that is the basic way to use the assignment tool. It's really easy for students because they can just drag and drop. Let me show you what that looks like for the student view. Is here. They can see that they haven't attempted it and it hasn't been graded, and they have 7 more days to do it, but they'll just click add the submission. And then really they just drag and drop whatever file they have on their computer. Save the changes and it goes right in there for you. And then if you wanted to view submissions, you will actually see, look, Robbie is a really good student. See, she did her work. She should probably get 100. Even I don't have to look at it. I'm just going to give her 100% right there. Save the quick grading changes. Continue. So that's the basic way to manage, to collect and sort of grade, manage, give feedback to writing in Moodle. So I'm going to pause for some questions, and I'm going to leave my sharing on in case you guys need me to show you something that's related to that question. My doorbell's ringing. Hashtag working from home. I don't even know what that is. They better go away. I'm busy. Anonymous, make the writing assignment submissions anonymous. You can anonymize the grading. I think it is Amazon. I'm a little excited. Do you see I'm like distracted because I want to go open that box right now. I'm gonna wait. I can do it. So Ben's question, can I make grading anonymous? Yes, you can. I need to see how to do that though, because I kind of forgot. It's going to be in grade, I think. Blind grading. So because I didn't set it before somebody submitted, Ben, I can't show you, but it would be right here. Blind grading, yes. And then you won't see who the student is. You'll just see a number until you've graded it, if that makes sense. Okay, great. Someone sent me a help ticket a while ago, said, wait, I accidentally made it anonymous and now I can't see, and now I need to see it actually. How do I undo that? And it was doable, but it was a little tricky. So just be sure that's what you want to do. And then you sort of have to commit to it while you grade it all. It's a little tricky to switch it back. Okay, yeah, bye, Jasmine. I think she may have logged off already. Right. Yeah, sure. I would say, blind grading might be most useful for larger classes or when you're first starting to grade work from your students. Unless your experience is really, really different from mine, by the time you've been grading student work for 6 weeks, you kind of know who you're looking at anyway. So the benefit of blind grading would be, you don't want to be biased, but often we kind of know whose work we're looking at Pacific with our really small classes, at least College of Arts and Sciences classes. So maybe if you're in a larger class or they're new to you, that would be useful. The check marks on the right side of each week. Yes, let me go out of, turn editing off. This is that activity completion that we set, Brandy, where notice that I got a check because I met conditions for this. I did not meet the conditions for this post because I need to post once and reply twice, and I didn't. So I don't have a check mark. In other courses, if you haven't set specific activity completion, it will be a checkbox with a smooth line. Notice how this one has little dashes. It'll be a smooth check, and students could just click it and check it off when they feel like they've completed it. Which then in your report, that report I showed you before, activity completion report, you would see a check mark, but you wouldn't really know if the student did it or not. If you want to make them do something and then the system will check it, then you want to set those activity completion marks. Did that answer your question, Brandy?
Hey, Robbie, I have a question.
Sure.
And it's actually maybe more of a request for you and Al. I would love to give an example of a really great discussion forum to my students so that they know what to expect. But I don't have one because I've never done it before. And I also don't really know what to expect from them in terms of a discussion forum and how detailed and thoughtful it should be. Sure, you're going to say, well, it depends on your learning objective and I completely agree. And I would still love to see if there's an example or a model or something like that.
Great. So you're hoping to get a model of a good student post, or a model of a good prompt, or yes?
Yes.
Right. Okay. I can take a look and see if I can find some things. Basically, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. I know you said you're going to say it, and I am going to say it, but what is it you're trying to get out of this interaction? Remember how I said earlier, what's the goal of this writing activity? What do you want it to do for them? And often what we want is to extend their learning, to sort of coalesce everything that they read. We want to kind of know, did they get the main points? Or we want to know, can they apply what we read in this chapter to all the other stuff we read? And so asking questions that they can sort of respond to, not necessarily like answer these 10 questions in 2 or 3 sentences each, but some questions to sort of guide a free response. I can look for some of those, but basically if you sort of say, I am looking for responses that summarize and then go beyond, that can be really helpful. I'll see what I can find, and I can actually either post them in a place, or I can email them on. So bye, Michelle.
Works for you. That would be really helpful, because I guess I'm just not even sure what I want. And so I feel like it would be helpful to see examples of what other people have done, just to kind of stimulate my own thinking in this area.
Right. And are you thinking about using them to sort of debrief readings or respond to media? Bye, Laura. What are you thinking that they might be reacting? Because to be honest, it really varies depending on, I mean, the tool will capture student interaction, but what counts as really energetic and thorough interaction. Depends on what they're responding to.
Right.
Um,
I might have them do some of their own activity at home and then maybe reflect about it and comment.
right, right. So
Oh.
a reflection, basically sort of like an outline of a good reflection would include a summary of what is it, summarize what it is you're talking about, thinking about, okay? So actually I call it like a SASSY, summary, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. So asking them to work through all 4 of those levels of critical thinking, like what did you do? Okay, talk about why you did what you did and why was it set up that way, so that sort of why question. And then, all right, so synthesize, how does this relate to anything else you've learned anywhere else in this class, or how does this relate to your future practice, so that kind of relational section. And then the last one could be evaluative, how useful was this for you, you know, how useful is this for your future, how hard did you work on this. A lot of those kind of general, it's just like sort of general moves that you can ask them to do. And I for sure will still give you some things, but for the purposes of sort of capturing this in the webinar, moving them through those 4 levels of critical thinking, you're going to get, you know, a good workout. They're going to get a good thinking workout.
Is there like a website that describes that model, or?
Well, I kind of invented it. I kind of stole it and
When you
modified it and invented it. So I can give you a document. I have a document that basically outlines what SASSY looks like.
Thank you.
And then I did a sassier, because why not? And the R on sassier stands for rhetoric. Like, what is the rhetorical work you see happening here? But I was teaching expository writing, and, you know, rhetorical moves are important, but they're also important if people are doing any kind of analysis of any kind of media, really. What is the rhetorical impetus behind this, or what rhetorical tools do you see them using, and are they being legitimate with that or not? Okay.
Great. You ready?
Christian likes that too. Okay, I can include, I'll just sort of send a bundle, a follow-up bundle to everybody that's logged on, and people who didn't want it can delete it, and people who do want it can have it. Great. Cool. So I'm going to look at Ben's question really quick. We are over time, or at time. So anybody who wants to go, feel free to go ahead and log off, and I will forward the link to this recording and the PowerPoint if you guys are interested, and just a little help bundle. So Erica did have a question. I will get back to your question. Don't let me forget. Good, keep reminding me. Let me look at Ben's. Let's see, can you post or share some resources about the instructions? Okay, the instructor's role in managing discussion boards. Yeah, that's actually something we should definitely talk about right now. Like, what are you supposed to do? Do you just wait until it's over? It was due Wednesday or due Sunday midnight, and then I'm going to look at it? That's not the best way to keep activity going, and it's not best practice in an online class. Best practice is for them to know that you're looking. And the best way to do that is to be present in there a little bit. It can be as simple as, hey, this is a cool idea. Way to go, guys. Or, ooh, I really like what you're saying here. And also you can then, like, partway through the week, you can sort of make your own post that sort of amplifies. Or if you're doing a little video check-in, you could be like, let's just really quick talk about these 3 people who did something really interesting in the forum. This, Sue, is a way to start to shape behavior. When you start to see it, you're like, ooh, that's good. Yes, do that more. And you can have everybody know to do that more by sort of shining a spotlight on that person's post. Be like, this person did a great job. I like how she X, Y, Z. So those are some of the things, Ben, that you can actually do in the forum to let them know that you're there. If you're doing something that's building community, that's really important. Like, it doesn't matter if the meme or the video you find is dorky. It's okay. They don't care. You're showing them that you're there and you're participating, and then they'll share their things. Or if it's something less goofy like that, then it's just like, let's just do a check back in. We're coming back. I'm here for you. I'm ready for you. I can't wait for you to come back. I'm still here. And we all still have important work to do. That can be really, really powerful too. Just to let them know you're looking at what they're putting in the Moodle course, because they might not ever know. I'm like, is anybody even looking at this? And they won't be motivated to keep doing work that they don't think anybody's paying attention to. Okay, so Erica had a question. Your question was, is it better to do this in Google or Moodle? And your question was Google Docs or Moodle. And is that right?
Yeah, so I have students working on a group project where they're progressively writing a paper together all semester long, and they're only a third of the way through it. So I was wondering which format would be better for them to have a discussion and an opportunity to ask me questions where it's just me and the 3 students in a cluster. So yeah, Moodle or Google, which would be easier?
Well, I actually have 2 suggestions.
Okay.
Two tools that might work. I would say if students are trying to compose simultaneously, Google Docs is brilliant for that. And it's the simplest way I know of for everybody to write on the same document at the same time. So if they've already started composing in Google Docs, I would say keep doing that. What's a little trickier is for you to have a live conversation with all of them at once, but that's where Zoom could come in. If you can schedule little check-ins with those writing groups, even if it's a 10-15 minute conference where you're like, hey guys, I've been looking at your Google Doc. I see that you're making progress. Bring your questions to our conference. We're going to conference this day at this time.
Okay.
That's what I think that would be the maximal interaction that you could get the most with them. Otherwise, you're going to be, all of that communication will be typed and it will probably be asynchronous.
Yeah, right. I know, because now some of them are in Oregon and some are in Hawaii, and they're all over the time zones now.
So it could be really helpful to bring them all together in one synchronous session, even if it's not very long, like a 15-minute check-in. You can review what they've been doing in that doc, and if they have questions ready for you, or they post their questions in a section of the doc somewhere right at the top, questions for Dr. Kleinknecht. And then when you can address those and just check in with them. I mean, that might be a way to use those tools. And obviously you could put the link in Moodle, or you could drop it right onto their Google Doc, honestly, the Zoom link right onto your Google Doc. Just like, we're all gonna go right here, click this button, and I'll see you here. So that's a really wonderful way to use writing, to get them to think and collaborate. And it's not super easy to do that on the same document in Moodle.
Right, that's what I was realizing. Okay, cool. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm wondering, are there other questions, important questions I'm missing here? Supportive documents and slides, I will include that, a little care package at the end of this that I'll send out to everyone. Any other questions or comments you guys want to jump in with here? Bye, Christian. Bye, Jana. I'm happy to hang out for another half hour or so to anybody who has questions. Bye, Brandy.
I have an unrelated question, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
So, how do I do the Zoom and have a co-host? So if I have a guest speaker and then I want that person to be able to use poll or something, instead of me doing that for my speaker, is there any way I can do it?
Well, why don't you hold on till the end of the session until we make sure everybody who has questions about this are here, and then I can just show you. How
Thank you.
that?
Thank you.
Sure.
Robbie, that was me working with Jeff.
Right. Good. Good.
I can
me
help asking him. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
thank
we'll
you.
talk about that. Okay. It's a 1-button click or 2-button click, Jeffrey. So it's easy. It's simple. I can talk to you about that in a second. Anybody else who's still in here have any other questions? Bye, Catherine. Bye, Erica, if you're going. Bye. Take care, everybody. Okay, we're down to not too many. I'm going to stop share for now. Okay, let's see, I still have a few folks in here. Those of you still remaining, do you have other questions about writing or using these tools in your class? Bye, Kathy. Okay. Right, so I don't think anybody else is here who has other questions about this. I'm going to stop recording so that this part, okay. Oh, it says I'm recording it.